Greetings! I have a special announcement just for you. Join me Sunday, December 29th at 4 p.m. for an Under the Moon Gate New Year Intention Setting Workshop. During the workshop, I will lead us in a dream-finding meditation. We will journal to our inner subconscious and manifest together the seeds and goals for 2025. 2025. Tickets are free and online now at newyearunderthemoongate.eventbrite.com. I cannot wait to welcome the new year with you. Welcome Under the Moon Gate. I'm Erin Bagwell, a developing intuitive medium, awakening witch, and documentary filmmaker. I'm sharing what I'm learning about living from the dead with stories and interviews to inspire us to find the magic within. And I am so excited because I know it has been culturally a crazy week full of very highs, a lot of lows. We got the 11/11 portal, just closed out Halloween. We didn't have the election. There's frost in the air. There is a lot happening. And so the first thing is I just want to offer us a moment of stillness and peace and calm. And I actually channeled something with my meditation group the other day, and I'm going to read it to you quick. The candle of peace never loses light. She shines eternally. She clears and clarifies, illuminates and purifies. You hold it in the center of your chest. If you need a moment of peace, just visualize the white candle within. And so that is something that I posted up on my Substack. Every now and then, if I get really specific channels like that, I'll add them on my notes. So if you want to follow me, underthemoongate.substack.com, you'll get episodes delivered to your inbox, and you'll get little notes like that. I want to read one listener testimonial. This is from Ellen, who left a comment on Apple Podcasts. She says, if you're on the verge of shifting your life in any fashion, afraid to come out as a new somebody, or afraid to stand in your power, this is a must listen and must follow podcast. Erin Bagwell is sharing her raw, authentic journey coming out as a medium. I love Erin's willingness to not only listen to spirit, but also take action on the guidance she receives. I'm loving being a witness to the Buffalo medium, stepping out of the dark womb of her broom closet and daring to stand boldly in the light of her truth and share it with us. What magic this is, and a balm for our weary souls. Oh, thank you, Ellen. What a beautiful, beautiful testimonial. I really appreciate the comments. I feel a great shift that has been happening with the podcast. I've been getting a lot of notes and a lot of messages. And so just wanted to say thank you before we start the show for everyone who's listening and sharing, commenting, booking readings. Your support doesn't go unnoticed. Now, let's dive in because I am so honored and excited today that we have Kara Daniels coming under the Moon Gate. Kara is an animal communicator who also connects with trees. She's a land healer. She's an educator. She's got her own podcast called Deep Root Connections, where she shares all the mystical and magical things happening in her world. And Kara and I talk about the logistics of being a spiritual creative, who's also a normal member of society. You know, what it feels like to come out of the broom closet and have your friendships and relationships shift. And we even dip a toe into the elemental world of faeries and elves. Now, I haven't really gone there yet with this audience about elementals. So I just want to give you a little brief 101 before Kara blows your hair back, you know, with all her incredible stories. So in meditation, when I am what we call in the astral plane, I will experience and visualize and meet all kinds of different beings. And some of them are, you know, past life ancestors and pets. And sometimes they're Pegasus, and sometimes they're more mystical creatures. When my grandmother started coming to me in the beginning of my journey, she used to have wings when I would visualize her. And she still does. Whenever I see her, she has wings. To me, they look like fairy wings and not angel wings. But that's just what I'm seeing. And part of what's exciting and interesting about being a spiritualist and believing in the astral and your meditation practice is that there really aren't any rules. You know, one day you might have a dragon come in that might talk to you and say something to you. And so it's kind of fun to just let the images and let the messages and let the things pour over you and see what's what. The thing I will say about elementals, which is kind of interesting, is a theory in spiritualism or spiritual thinking that things like fairies, elves, gnomes, trolls coexisted with us at some point and then decided because we were destroying the earth, they bippity-bopped, out into another dimension. So what's fun about the work that Kara does with land healing is that sometimes she gets to interact with these beings, and sometimes there is a bit of a crossover where they're coming into our dimension. Now, I know that is a lot of it woo-woo for some of our listeners who are kind of dipping their toe into spiritualism and things like that. But what I would ask is that you just remain open-minded and have fun listening and come to your own conclusions. See how it feels. See how it sounds. And enjoy this deep conversation because Kara is one of the all-time greats, and I'm honored to have her under the moon gate. Kara, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
I am such a big fan of yours. I love following you and listening to your spiritual journey. And I feel like in a world where there's a lot of misinformation, I always feel so grounded, and what you share always rings so true. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for sharing your authentic voice with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I tried to stay grounded in a world of being able to go up into the ethers and do all these different things. It's like being grounded is the most important aspect to me. So I appreciate that.
Mm. So you are an animal communicator, you're a land healer. For people in our audience who might not be familiar with how one can connect to such beings, do you mind giving us a little bit of a taste of kind of how it came to be and how your spiritual gifts opened?
Sure. I hope you have a minute. It's
We'd
a
love
little bit of a story.
we'd love to get into all of it.
Okay, just kind of rewinding back to my childhood, and then I promise we won't go through my 36 years. but, but I was definitely a child that was just naturally sensitive. I wouldn't say I was tapped in or uh, necessarily psychic or could communicate, but I had a sense that there was more, and I feel like I was just right on the edge of it. I mean, I would always go play with the caterpillars and dance in the wind, and I spent a lot of time alone just kind of being happy in the gardens, and so that never really left me, that kind of just whimsical way of living, even though I went into wildlife biology and the sciences. Um, Once I kind of dove into my formal career of choice, if you will, I was like, oh no, this is not a good fit. What am I going to do?
You
Where
mean
does one
about
like me go?
you mean about the biology or about animal communication?
The biology. So
Yeah.
my initial trajectory was conservation, biology.
Yeah.
I just felt so rejected. My
Mm,
soul was just like, you don't fit here, but you're trying to shove yourself into the space.
got it. Got it.
And so it was a really clunky, about 10 years of my life where I just kept trying to make it work because I didn't know where else to go.
Yeah.
And finally one day, I literally was just like, I give up. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know how to make a
Mm.
difference. And for the previous 2 years leading up to that, I would just cry a lot. It was not a good time in my life.
Yeah, been there.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was not good. I didn't know what to do. I felt lost, but I also had this innate, like this really strong drive to make a
Mm.
difference. I
Mm-hmm.
knew I was here for something big, but I was like, where do I go with it? And so the moment I kind of surrendered and said, I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing, but like, please open a door. Please show me the way. As soon as I
Mm.
surrendered and actually asked for help,
Yeah.
this is when everything started to happen for me. A stray cat came into my life and she started to communicate with me. And when that happened, I was like, oh, animal communication, cool. Like, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing that can happen. I mean, I have hired animal communicators before, so that never really surprised me, if you will. I
Mm-hmm.
believed in it. But the fact that I could do it was kind of a shock to the system. And so my science brain basically said, okay, if that can happen once on accident, how can we
Yeah.
do this again with intention? And
Can
so
I can I
that's
can I interject with a question?
sure.
So you said that you had hired animal communicators before, so you're spiritually open to the
Mhm.
potential ability of getting help from people. What do you think it was about Esther the cat that opened you, or that click happened? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who might feel like, hey, I have this great connection with nature and with animals, but I can't do it. Like
Hmm.
what do you think was that kind of magical moment? Do you think it was a readiness on your part, or do you think the cat just had something to say? Like how do you think it came to be, that
Yeah,
first connection?
I think it definitely was I was ready to
Mm,
receive. I was in a space of just like, I don't know what's next. Somebody help me. And she literally was within, I think, a week after I surrendered and asked for help. She came into my life and I was like, that's cool. Like, here's a cool cat.
oh wow, so it was kind of like a reaction to the surrender,
Yes.
was then this new thing happened. Cool. Okay.
And of course, I'm not thinking animal communication at this time.
Right.
She was pregnant, so I kept her. I wanted to help her have her kittens.
Mhm.
Um, I couldn't keep her long term, but so I had this time frame with her, which I really got to know her. At the same time, I had taken a job where I was literally pulling weeds for 8 hours a day and doing the landscaping on this golf course. So I was
Mhm.
really grounded. I was very connected to nature. I was quiet. And then when I went home after my job, I was kind of already really tapped into the whole um, grounded energy, if you will. And then I would go hang out with this cat. And she also is very grounded. And at this time, she had her kittens. And so we were just hanging out under the trees. And that's when she started to talk to me. She looked at me, and I was not looking at her. And I could feel her stare,
Mhm.
like piercing my soul, if you will, like that
Yeah.
really intense stare. So I looked over at her. And I was like, what's your name? Because I hadn't named her yet, and I had no idea what her name was. And she looked at me and I could feel her energy in me, if you will.
Mhm.
And when I asked that question, what is your name? Samantha popped into my head.
Mhm.
And it was her voice. It felt like it was implanted in my brain. And then I also heard all of her kittens starting to chime in.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for me, I was like, okay, that's really cool. Like, how did that happen? So for people wondering how to do this or open up that connection, I mean, when it comes to having a connection with our own animals, I find that it's a little different than communicating or connecting with animals that we are not familiar with.
Okay, say more
Because,
about that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
we are already entangled with the energy of our own animals.
Okay.
And so we're already communicating with them. It's
Mhm.
just maybe not as obvious.
Yeah.
it comes to us kind of more, generally speaking, intuitively. Like, oh, my dog doesn't feel very good, and this is
Right. My
probably
cat needs
why.
water. I got to get up
Hmm.
and they need something.
Yeah, it's just kind of like an intuitive flow because they're communicating with us and we're picking up on that. And we just
Hmm.
naturally think, oh, I should go check my horse's water. And then, oh, look, it's empty.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
them talking to you. And so when it comes to our own animals, I find, this is a personal opinion, that it's harder to tease out kind of those stronger messages unless you sit down and really focus and ask them to be really potent.
Mm.
Which is why when I teach, we work with animals that nobody knows anything about. Because on the flip side of that, when we are not already entangled with our energy or their energy, we can feel more palpably, if you will, their energy, their unique signature, their personality. The information that's coming in is unfamiliar to us, and so it seems like it's a lot stronger and louder.
Yeah, there's a vibrancy to it because I will
Mhm.
say I've done readings before where animals will come through and I'll be able to, get their personalities or if they have a message or kind of what they were like when they were living. But, I'm constantly trying to get at my cat, Lucy, and be like, what's going on with her and, what's happening. And it's I'm glad you said that because I already feel kind of subconsciously like I can read her mind a little bit, but I can't hear her voice. And I do find it harder to, have a dialogue, I will say, because she's just, I like what you said about your energies already being entangled.
Yep. Yep. And another thing that my cat always likes to make sure people know is that she's talking to me right now. She's like, "Don't forget this. This is important."
Okay, perfect. Tell us.
It's more than the entanglement.
Mm,
Part of it as well is because like our minds are constantly noisy. We're busy. We're thinking, I can't remember the stats, but we're thinking the same thought however many times a day. It's just noise. We're very noisy thinkers. And so
yes.
my cat, she's like, sometimes I just don't listen to you because you're annoying. Because you're just
So
sitting there
funny.
thinking.
Eleanor's dog. I've had this conversation with Eleanor and her dog, and her dog had some teeth problems, and we were kind of communicating with the dog, um, and she was like, "You guys talk so much. Like all you do is talk, 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 talk." Like there was this frustration and this annoyance. Same thing of like, "Gosh, humans like won't shut up."
Yes, yes. So she's like, sometimes I just don't listen, and sometimes you don't listen, and that's fine. Like, if it's an
Yeah.
important message, and I feel like this is a big takeaway, if it's important,
Mm,
you will not miss the message. You will feel it, sense it, intuitively know it, and that's all that really matters. I think bigger picture wise is like they're going to communicate with you the big stuff if they need to.
hmm I love it. How did you mosey from animal communication to land healing and trees and the space that I think is so fascinating of really being kind of not only in tune with nature, but in tune with the land and the history that somebody might be living on?
Hmm. I give the animals complete credit for my journey.
They were the gateway.
They really truly were. And that kind of goes back to I needed to have proof of connection to really feel confident in my skills.
Sure.
And so after I opened my business, I offered professional animal communication for about a year with clients. I was like, I really got this. Like I'm doing a really good job at this. And the moment I had that thought, it was like the next phase is coming. And I
Mm,
could feel it. And I was like, there's more here. I know that this isn't like the end game for me. And
yeah.
I also at that time felt really disconnected to nature. And so I was like, well, where do I go now?
Hmm.
And so what I did was I asked the animals, I was like, okay, what's next? There's more. Where do I go? What do I do? And the animals basically told me, they're like, okay, go find yourself a tree guide. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And they told me, they're like, nature communicates too. everything can communicate with you. And so they told me, go find a tree guide. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did. And when I got there, I took myself on a walk and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, if there's a tree out here, let me know. And it's like this whole forest of trees. But this one tree in particular, I think within 100 steps of me walking from my car onto the trailhead, literally called my attention. It was off to my right down this little hill. And I just felt this presence next to me, like very gentle, masculine,
Mm.
almost like a touch on the shoulder, if you will. Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready. Like, look my way. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool tree. And I just kept walking. And then the energy got a little bit stronger.
Mm.
And so I went down and I was like, how do I talk to a tree? I don't know. And so I used my animal communication skills, like how do I open a session and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it'll work. And it did. And this tree just started talking to me, and we both ended up crying. It was so beautiful. And he basically said, he's like, your path forward is to learn the language of the land. You're a
Mm.
translator for Gaia, basically. And I was like, okay, again, these messages come in, and I was just like, I don't know, but I'm going to go there because so far everything has kind of fallen into place. I haven't been led astray yet.
Mm.
And so I started talking to this tree, which led me to connecting with a bunch of other trees to kind of just see what happened. And the trees started to teach me about land healing.
Mm.
And then it kind of just built from there. The animals were teaching me about land healing and earth energies. The trees were verifying and giving me more. I mean, it literally just blew my world wide open. And I was kind of like playing catch up. I'm like, who can help me with this? How can I make sense of all of this? Because my mentors at the time, they were like, we don't know what you're talking about.
Mm.
And so a lot of it was self exploration and self teaching. I did look into Norse and Celtic shamanism just to kind of make sense of things.
Yeah.
And really everything kind of has just built on top of each other, and I guess here we are.
Here we are.
Here we
I
are.
feel like you have so many incredible stories of, hearing from the land, hearing from the animals, helping people with predicaments or problems. Do you have any favorite stories about things that when you tell them, you're like, I wish I could make this up, but like, this is really what happened. You know what I mean?
Oh, I feel like all of my land healings are like that. Like I'm not that creative, really.
Hmm.
So I can't make this stuff up and my mind is constantly blown. Gosh. All right, this one I guess is wanting to come out. This woman hired me to kind of check in with her land and her home. I also connect in with like the spirit of the home and do a lot of clearing. And when I got to her property, mind you, this is kind of on the astral plane. I do
Hmm.
all of my work remote. And so I send my energy out and look at the different layers that need my attention, if you will.
Do you
And when
need a
I,
photo or anything of a person's house, or how do you kind of channel in? You just get an address, or kind of where's your starting point?
mhm. Usually I do a call with the people
Okay.
because they call me because like the energy is funky, something's not quite right.
Yeah.
And so I always get their address. I have them send me pictures of like their front of the house, the back of the house, and
Mm-hmm.
then any areas that they just feel intuitively drawn to take pictures of. Sometimes it's trees, sometimes it's just like a green meadow or a grass
Mm-hmm.
patch. Um, so yeah, I kind of just leave it up to the client or the person, just like whatever you feel intuitively drawn. Like if this area over here feels really weird, make sure to take a picture of that.
Yeah.
And so I can look at the pictures and kind of see the overlays of energy there. But before I do anything, I just dive in without the address, without the pictures. I just kind of get a baseline
Yeah.
of how the energy is externally of the house within the land and then within the house. And then I kind of tease away all of the different layers through the pictures and wherever else. Essentially the
Mm-hmm.
guides are sharing where I need to go and look. But
Yeah.
that's the start.
Okay.
So with this one in particular, she said, my house feels pretty good. I'm just curious. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And she was an energy healer and her partner was an energy healer and they were already working with the land. So I was like, this is going to be so much fun. Like, it's going to be magic. Well, I got there
Uh-oh.
energetically and I always start at the property boundary or street view to kind of just ask to come in. I always
Mm-hmm.
like to be really polite. And the trees blocked me out. This is my favorite part. They they had been asked by their people to hold a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, these trees literally lined the driveway, energetically blocked me out.
I
And
love it.
I could have pushed the boundary. I could have been extremely rude and just like walked right in, but that's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sized me up. They're like, "Why are you here?"
Mm.
I was like, because your mom essentially asked me to kind of just check around and see who is on the property here, elemental wise. And they were like, no, no, we are guardians. We
Mm.
did not know you were coming, and we do not want to allow energies that are unfamiliar to come in. And so they sized me up, and trees can like look into our soul essence to know if we are working with the light or other maybe less than high vibe intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they let me in,
Oh my
but they
gosh.
were like, we're gonna watch you. I was like, you should watch me.
Yeah.
Like, we're here to work together. Like, I'm your friend here. And so I actually called my client and I was like, hey, just so you know, your trees are really suspicious of me. Can you just let them know? Like, I'm good. It was so funny. And the trees were so cool. They eventually gave me a tour of the entire property and all of the different energies that we needed to look at to increase the vibration.
Mm.
So that was part one. But when it came to the house, so there's always two parts. There's the land aspect of it, and then there's the actual house aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Her house was pretty clear and clean. Again, she was an energy healer. She worked from her home, so she was really cognizant of keeping the space
Space.
clear.
Yeah.
But there was one room. She's like, I don't know why. Like, I can't get this cleared. Just
Mm.
take a look. I'm like, okay. So energetically, I'm looking in. It was a room on the upper level. And there's this thing there, this being, not your typical elemental or nature spirit,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes they get stuck inside and it's not a big deal. But this one was really weird. It was like a combination of a bunch of different types of beings kind of squished together.
Mm.
I was like, what are you? Not a bad spirit at all,
Yeah.
just there. And he was
Okay.
really sad and really lonely.
Mm.
I was like, who are you? This is where I was like, I actually can't make this up. I called in my guides and I was talking to this being, and we learned that he was a thought form.
Hmm.
That the children that used to live in this house were basically, it's not so great. They were locked in the upper room for hours on end. They were kind of neglected.
Mm.
And because of that, they used a lot of their imagination. And so they created like an imaginary friend, quote unquote,
Oh
that
my
manifested
goodness.
into an actual
Entity.
being, yes, in
Wow.
existence. And so this poor thing was so sad. And I'm gonna cry now because he like my heart for this
Yeah.
entity that was created. He was just sitting there. He was like, I was their caretaker. Like they needed somebody here to talk
Mm.
to tell them stories, to be with. And I was just like, holy moly. And then these kids left, they moved.
Right.
He was like, I don't know where to go now. I don't know what to do. So I've been hiding up here for years because I
Wow.
didn't want to like intrude on the new people, but I don't know where to go.
Right.
I was like, oh, my friend, I know this is ridiculous, but hugs. Like
Yeah.
I'm all teary-eyed now because of how lonely and how sad he had been for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we worked together with all of the nature spirits and my guides, and we relocated him. And now he's really happy and doing really well. And then the energy shifted immediately in their house.
Hmm.
Yeah, weird things like that happen a lot.
So how do you relocate him? Do you ask him to leave or do you visualize a new place for him to be? Just kind of logistically, how does that?
Yeah, for this one in particular, I always work with a team of
Okay.
guides with angels, other elemental beings. It just kind of depends on the unique situation. In this case, if I can recall correctly, there was a unicorn. There was a unicorn guy that came in and Archangel Raphael. And they
Do you
basically
have,
said,
sorry, I'm interrupting again. Do you have the
no,
same
you're
set
good.
of guides per experience? So every house is different. A new set of energy comes through.
Yeah, I do have a core group of guides
Yeah.
that work with me when I'm like, I need a little extra perspective here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I try my best to work with the spirits of the land and home themselves because they are the ones that are connected there and they know all of the different layers and
Got it. Got it. Got it.
intricacies going on.
Okay.
And then when we need to relocate, it's like, all right, y'all, we got to figure out where this thing goes. Sometimes it's the fairies will take them into their realm. Sometimes they need to go into a different dimension, wherever they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends. Every land healing, home healing is different.
Amazing. So I'm gonna like pause us on like the logistics because I feel like now people have like a background of your experience and your expertise and kind of the beings that you're working with in the astral. When you first started kind of getting dipping into the spiritual practice, did you think you were going crazy? Like what were your how were your feelings and your, tell me about it.
There were a lot of moments where I'm like, I think I've lost my mind. I actually think I'm crazy. I mean, yeah, I because number one, like I have a pretty open family, but we're not that tapped in. And the
Mm-hmm.
ones that are, they don't talk about it. So like I have a
Mm.
tapped in family, but nobody talks about it. And then I started with animal communication, which is pretty like I don't want to sound horrible, but it's like kind of cut and dry. You talk to the animal, you check in with them. And that was like my spiritual background. That was my training. So when
Hmm.
all of this other stuff started happening, I was like, okay, I don't know about this. Like, did I go too far?
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a leap from, okay, can you talk to dead people? Can you talk to animals is like the next level, and then trees, and then I feel like the element like it all adds onto itself, right? Of okay, I've got to believe. You've got to have like a
Yeah.
gateway place in your beliefs.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And like kind of going back to my childhood, that core belief system was still there. So it was almost just like teasing me along, like, keep going, girl, you got this. Like, this
Mm,
is what you knew as a child, you just didn't know. So I had a tug and pull happening. I was like, my logical scientific mind was like, no, I think I've gone too far.
yeah.
But the other aspect of me, like my core soul, was like, keep going. And so I was
Mm.
like, I'm going to go there no matter where I end up, even if it's in a psych ward.
And how is your, partner, family, like how did you come out to them right away? Like how does this integrate in your actual life?
Yeah. Now I'm very open now with
Right.
everybody in my family. And
Sure.
again, I'm so lucky. Like my family is wonderfully supportive. They don't get it, but they're like, Kara's gonna do Kara. It's all
Yeah.
good. Um, but when I started communicating with this cat at the very
Mm-hmm.
beginning,
Yeah.
I took a few classes and I was like, it's not really working out for me. And then I hadn't really told my husband at this point. I was just
Mm-hmm.
exploring and tinkering. I was like, I don't really
Sure, sure.
know.
Test the waters.
Yeah. And then I was getting really serious about it and committed. And there was this class. It was a $4,000 class. And I didn't have the money to do it because at the time I had been a stay-at-home mom for 2 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so my income was minimal. And I was like, how could I ask for $4,000 for this class
Mm-hmm.
after I haven't told him anything about it for like two
Mm-hmm.
years? I mean, it was a really awkward conversation
So
because, like,
you
my
were
ego.
practicing. So you were practicing for
Yeah.
about 2 years
Yeah, I
in the
was.
in the broom closet, as we say.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
I was reading books. I was
Sure.
just learning to meditate and ground and kind of
Tinkering.
just playing with some cards, my oracle cards. I was just tinkering, kind of just in my
Yeah.
own time. And then things got serious and I had to ask for money. It was awful. My ego
Mm.
yelled at me. It was it was so hard. And so that's when I had to be like, "Hey, so I've been doing this for a few years. And I really want to take this class and I don't know why, but I'm going to literally be awkward and ask and I promise I'll pay you back." And it was like this whole thing. And he just looked at me. He's like, "Okay." I was like, "Really?" I mean, he was like, "I trust you. I know who you are. I trust you. I might not understand it, but like, I'm here to support you."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay, like, you're the coolest husband ever." And I took my class, and it didn't take me long to make that money back because I started my business and everything kind of blew up from there. But yeah, it was a really weird few years there where I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody. And then when I did
Mm-hmm.
start to come out, my family wasn't a concern, but my friends were, and more specifically my
Mm.
husband's friends, because I was like,
Mm.
they know I'm weird, but like it's a different kind of group of people. I was worried about how we as a family would be received if I was like, yeah, so I'm a psychic and I can talk to animals.
And how did it go?
Um, let's just say when I finally decided to go public with it, his friends called him that day. They're like, what is she doing? And he
Mm.
explained as best as he could. And they were like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, whatever. Kara's gonna do Kara.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, they still, fast forward like 5 years later, they're still asking me questions like, how does it actually work? Some of them have actually hired me. And so it's so
Softened.
strange, but yeah, they just, they know me and therefore they just kind of roll with me. So that's nice.
Do you have any advice for people who are maybe starting at the precipice of understanding their abilities and their gifts, but they're terrified to come out and talk about it? Do you have any like advice for kind of younger Kara about your journey and what you wish you would have known, or any words of support or wisdom?
Yeah, I would say, well, in this time of social media, for better or for worse, the online space has amazing communities. And when you are the only person that you know that does this or is even beginning to dip their toes in, it's like you do want to talk to somebody so you can verify that you're not going crazy.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so whether that's like in person, or online, especially for people like me that wanted to stay really quiet and secret for a long time,
Hmm.
the online space was really helpful because I could creep in a non-creepy way, like see what other people are doing. Like, okay, this is
Absolutely.
making sense here. I
Hmm.
actually have questions about this. And
Yep.
so there is a lot of information out there, but the community space that is available, I think, is really important for people to stay grounded and
Hmm.
and keep going because it's easy to be like, no, it's too much
Yeah.
and kind of stop.
Say more about like it being too much.
It's depending on kind of the individual's skills or what's opening up for them or where they're curious about. Some people, when they begin diving into their skills, they go from not necessarily believing to, I'm just going to see what happens, to, holy moly, I just saw a dragon and an angel. And it's like, my mind is blown. So sometimes there's not that like ease into the space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that can be too much for people. Even people in my animal communication class, we go from like evidential information, really grounded and physically based, to, by the way, one of my students last week just took a ride on my horse that's in spirit, who is also Pegasus. Like, and that took maybe 5 weeks to get there.
Yeah.
So, so sometimes it just depends on how people's skills open up, how fast they open up. And it's like, this is too much too fast. Like, I'm going to close back down. And a lot of people
Mm,
fear their gifts and
right.
fear the unknown. And so, truly having a support system to be like, I want to talk about this because it's happened. Like, can anybody help me move through this or think about this, or any words of wisdom type of thing?
Can we talk about, because I have talked about angels before on the podcast. I don't know if I've mentioned fairies before. I have an elf that is one of my guides. That's one of the first elementals that appeared to me. I was like, what is this guy doing with this long white hair and these pointy ears? Um, and I've seen the Pegasus. I mean, there are these beings that we know about from our childhood, from fiction or magical characters, for lack of a better way to describe them. And then when we see them in the astral, it absolutely can be very jarring but also very exciting and very whimsical. How do you describe it to people when all of a sudden they're meditating and a mermaid floats by? Like, what are we supposed to do with this? These magical beings that pop into our imagination and our third eye and all of those things.
Yeah, well, I try to be as transparent about this as possible. And so when you are attracted to my message, my energy, what I teach, like, we just dive into the world of metaphysical really quickly. And I always encourage people to go with it. Even if they think if it's in their imagination, if they think they've totally lost it, it's like, we'll go with it and just see what happens. Like, you're safe. We're in a container, you're safe.
Mm,
See what happens. And so that's why I like to start people with animals, because they're comfortable and they're
yeah.
physical. But when, like, my student went flying on my horse, I could
Mm-hmm.
feel it. And so part of that is like, she was questioning the experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
literally felt it while I was holding space. And I was like, who went flying? Somebody just went for a ride. I could see
Yeah.
that. And so, like, there's confirmation there. So I always just say, tap back into your inner child, just go with it, see what they have to say. And if, when in doubt, you have control to push them out. Like,
Mm.
if it's too much, you can push them out and say, nope, this is my space. So I encourage people to dive in, because these beings have such wisdom and medicine for us. But if it's too much, it's okay too.
Now, why do you think you mentioned a little bit that they have wisdom verse, but why are, fairies showing up and things like that? What are they doing?
From my understanding, this is what they have shared with me, is all of these different beings, whether they are the fairies and the elves, very intricately connected to nature, or the Pegasus that's kind of interdimensional, flying back and forth. They are all here to help us remember
Mm,
our innate connection to the unseen realms. So if you
okay.
look way, way, way back in history and time, there was a time where humans and all of these elemental beings coexisted on the same frequency. But
Mm-hmm.
humans decided to take a different path, and a lot of these beings went into a different frequency. So they're still here. And now is time to bring that connection back. So a lot more people now are seeing the elves in the forest or the fairies in their garden. And it's like, because they're ready to rekindle that connection with humanity as caretakers and guardians of the earth, working together for the greater good. And so that's the message that I keep getting, and that's the message that I share.
I feel like there's also a lot of magical wisdom that's coming through. Like I recently had a fairy come to me in meditation and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then she like kind of never left. And I was like, okay, she's just here now. She's part of the board. And I get this innate sense that she's going to teach me magic, that there is something that I'm here to learn, and I'm going to learn it specifically from this woman, which is exciting. But yeah, it is such a weird it's a weird thing to bring up, at the Thanksgiving table. Like, what do you
Yeah.
I'm curious, to have your in-laws, or any other family members come to you, or any other weird interpersonal stories about, people maybe being not sure and how that all works?
Within the family, my husband's parents they don't really know how to talk to me about this. We keep it very grounded in animal communication.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really talk at all about it. Although his mom, every time I see her, she's so cute. She's like, I felt my mom hugging me the other day. Her mom is in spirit.
Mm,
And she always tells me, she's like, yeah, my mom was hugging me. And I guess one of her sisters, the day that her mom died, saw her mom's orb and spirit. So, like, there's things that
yeah.
she shared with me, but they don't really ask or talk about it. And so we kind of just keep the
Keep it.
family life, just keep it super physical.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine too. I mean, I'm not here to push or, make people listen to all the crazy things that I do. If you ask, great. If not, that's fine too.
Yeah. How does it affect your ability, not your ability, but you're a mom, you're running a household, you've got a slew of animals you're taking care of. How does your gifts or your abilities kind of interfere or enhance your ability to kind of just do your day-to-day life?
Yeah, it's complicated. I think just being a human trying to be in both worlds at once is hard.
Mm,
Um, yeah, where do I want to go with this? I just know that I have to chunk my time out
okay.
appropriately. It's like kiddo has to have his lunch made. Like this is the beginning of my day. We're not going to go into the physical or the metaphysical world. We're just going to be really grounded. We're going to make
Mm-hmm.
pancakes. And so for me, it's like I have an on and off switch. So when I'm with my family, I tend to just be in that space. And then I allocate time to do my energy healing, to tap in. I mean, I'm lucky that my son goes off and goes to school. And so I have a whole chunk of my day where I'm like, okay, we're going to go take care of the animals. We can do some energy healing, go tinker in the garden.
Yeah.
And in that space, I can kind of be in both worlds. And then, the family comes home. I'm like, all right. Got to put that magic away for just a minute. But
Yeah.
he leans into it. We work with rocks and crystals, so like we can kind of dabble there. But yeah, it really, for me, I have to have an on and off switch, or
Mm,
I get really spacey. I get mean. And this is what I
yeah.
noticed is that like I at one point just wanted to be in the magical world because it's so much more fun.
Mm.
And when I kept getting pulled out of it, I would be such a jerk. I was like, God, I'm not a nice person right now. This isn't okay. Because like I want to be over here looking at rainbows and unicorns, and my son is crying because he doesn't have a cookie or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, having kind of that allocated, dedicated time for both kind of helped me navigate that.
Mm.
It's hard.
It is hard. It's such a weird process. I'm wondering, do you have you said that you kind of take the time when he's at school. Are you allowing yourself to kind of be in the astral every day, or do you have any routines or rituals, or is it just kind of come when it can?
Yeah, it depends. Like if I have a specific list of clients that week, then I kind of just tailor my energy and intentions to that. A
Mm-hmm.
land healing takes more than one day usually, so I just kind of plan on being in the astral for for some time. Otherwise, I try to do bring the energy into my physical world. So I go out into the garden and we tap in simultaneously. I talk to the fairies and I'm pulling weeds or whatever. So I try to really intermingle them both.
Mm.
That's my natural state of being, really. When I'm walking in the forest, we're doing both at one time. We're feeling
Mm-hmm.
into the unseen and staying in the physical. So that really is my sweet spot. But, gotta stay grounded a little bit more when other humans are involved.
How do you stay grounded?
Being outside, just little things, feeling the dirt beneath my feet, feeling the temperature and texture of the air in my lungs,
Mm.
looking at the sky, letting the sun just be on my face, or wind or snow or whatever whatever the elements are for the day. And being with my animals helps. Just being in the present physical moment of now is to me the most grounding.
I'm receiving that. I'm receiving that. I'm reflecting on it as well. I'm always looking for grounding techniques, especially in Buffalo when, we get like a 6-month winter. So it's harder to be outside. That's why I have my little indoor garden I've started. It's like, how do we pull it in? How do we pull it in? And
Yeah.
keep it warm and keep it green. Um, I'm wondering, has your partner, has your husband, have you seen him spiritually open through your experiences? And
Mm, no, yes and no, I suppose. He has questions.
mm-hmm,
Like, how does this actually work? He's very logically minded. He's an engineer, if that helps put him into perspective. He's like, I need this to make sense.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
Of
sometimes he
course,
will.
the engineer would marry the animal communicator. Beautiful.
I
That's a
know
sitcom
it.
waiting to happen. I'll write it immediately.
I do feel like our conversation sometimes should be recorded. I'm like two opposites trying to have a conversation about this topic. Is so funny. But yeah, so he has some experiences, he has some dreams, but no, and I don't push it. Otherwise, what's been really interesting is that one of his really good friends, his wife is a good friend of mine, and she is within the last 6 months, like her skills are exploding, and she
Mm,
has gone from like corporate world to I'm doing energy healing, and this is a lot more fun. So she's really, for the last 6 months, opened up her gifts
cool.
and has opened up her husband's gifts, which in
Mm,
turn is like
domino.
all of a sudden my husband's like, okay, well, hold on. If my friend is doing this, like, right, like I'm not the one that's going to do it for him or get him there, but
Yeah.
his friends are, which I
Mm,
think is really interesting. And so the more that his friend talks about it, my husband's like, well, I'll let that sink in. Maybe I'll
yeah.
revisit that later. So it's interesting to kind of watch his progression, not through me.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. And I will say my friend Ellen, I'm part of like a little meditation group and it's a bunch of gals that get together once a week and we channel and we meditate for world peace and we talk about our lives and our families and things that are going on or crazy stories. And Ellen, one of the women who's part of the group, always says like, you don't need your husband to co-sign your spiritual journey, when we're feeling misheard or not understood. And I think it is such a beautiful gift, to allow yourself the ability to walk through that door if you want to. And then what you so generously said that, it's not your place or space to push him either. And I will say from my experience, it's definitely been a journey coming out and having these conversations. And I always have to approach my husband, Sal, with not trepidation, but like, are you ready to hear a weird story about bees today? Like, he has to kind of be in the mood to receive it. which is understandable. You know, we're sharing some interesting worldly wisdom that you've got to kind of be in the mood and to understand and to believe. So I get
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I love that. I also think that a lot of women moving into the space need to give themselves the permission to go there because in the end, opening up to your gifts is a solo journey, no
Mm.
matter what, even if you have your community. So it's giving yourself permission to go there when nobody else is.
Oh, I love that. I'm wondering, how old is your son?
He's 8 right
He's
now.
8.
Hmm.
Does he know what you do? Like how are you? Tell me about that.
Okay. Yeah, he's
Because
such an interesting.
I have a 6-year old.
Hmm.
So
Very nice.
she knows I'm a witch. She knows she's so funny. She loves making moon water. So there like we do like a little bit of here and there. But I'm so curious as she gets older, like how am I going to explain this to her? Like what do we do?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, especially when there's so many children out there right now that are born, they're awake, they've got all this
Hmm.
stuff going on. And then I have my son. I'm like, dang, I thought we were gonna have a magical kid here, and you're super practical. Hmm. So he's really interesting. He's taught me a lot. So kind of going back to when I was first learning and playing with my oracle cards and crystals, he was about 1.5 to 2. And so he
Hmm.
was with me all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go play with my cards. Do you want to play with them with me?
Hmm.
And so when he was really young, he would pull cards. And I tell you what, that kid just picked the right one every single time. And when I would
Mm.
put the card back in and shuffle it, and I'd be like, draw again, he'd pick the same card.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So kind of in that chunk of time with him, he was playing with the oracle cards. I was teaching him how to like hold crystals in his hands and do breathing, and we talk about it. And then he merged into society and friends.
Then you lose them and it's like a whole
Uh-huh.
different world.
And then I lost him. Yeah, but I can see him kind of coming back around.
Mm.
He's asking more questions. And at the same time, I am more open to it. I'm like, Mom has to work today. I'm going to be talking to this animal. Do you want to see its picture? And then he'll talk to me about it. He's like, how do you talk to animals?
Mm.
And so we talk about it. I don't force anything. If he has questions, cool. If not, cool. But he knows I'm a tree person and he's like, oh, Mom and her trees. And he makes fun of me. But then, like, when nobody's looking, he'll be like, hey, Mom, what is this tree like?
Hmm.
So we'll see how it all progresses. But I mean, if he has questions, I'm there. If not, cool. I really want to be conscientious about like the way his friends and like perceive me.
Hmm.
Like I'm trying to keep him out of the line of fire if because we live in a small community
Sure.
that's pretty religious still.
That's my mother's biggest fear. She's like, what are
Yeah.
your girls like? What are their
Yeah.
friends' moms going to say about you? You know, if they find out you're a medium. So, um, what are your thoughts about that? You're just kind of keeping it, you're being open with him.
Mhm.
But then, like, what if you go to a PTA meeting? Like, I'm an animal communicator?
I know I hate social gatherings. Every once in a while, my husband's like, "Yeah, so my company's having a party." I'm like, "What do I tell them? What do I do for work?" You know,
Yeah.
I try to keep it really casual. I'm like, "Oh, I teach people to meditate or do energy healing." You know, I keep it so, and they're
Got it. Got it.
engineers,
Got
and
it.
I just like
No,
don't want to go
that's,
there.
yeah, that's beautiful.
But
You're giving them a little taste, you know?
yeah, not a lie, but not the whole truth. But I did have an incident the other day that was unexpected, where our really good friends, we're just having a dinner party, and she looks at me. She's like, "Are you an animal medium?" And I was like, "Oh shoot." I guess now people in my little community know, and all of those fears came back. I'm like, I don't want my son to be ostracized. I don't want him to not have friends because mom's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got so nervous and I just like barfed out all of my story. And I was like, Kara, stop talking. They don't care. But I wasn't ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very awkward. But they were really cool with it. They were like, "Oh, that's awesome. Like, tell me more." I was like, "Okay, this is actually not a big deal." And if it is for some people at some point in time, that I have to remember is not me. It's not like they can put their stuff onto me, but I have to keep that kind of at a distance. And so I'm ready to navigate it if it becomes a thing, but I do try to
Sure.
keep a low profile in my little community, even though
Your
people find
internet
out.
community is quite big though, so it's,
Yeah,
probably like a little bit of a challenge to want to grow and then also remain.
it's going to be what it's going to be. I mean, most of the people in my community that know me, they're like, "Oh, this is so cool. Let's talk about it." And so there is a group of spiritual people in my community that want to be more open about it and bring this further into the community. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll support you from a distance. Like, I got this going on. I don't have time for that. And I want to watch and protect my son as best as I can." We'll see. It might all blow up in my face one day. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but we'll
Well,
see.
yeah, I'll be there right along with you, being like, this
Awesome.
happened to me and let's talk about it. So, because
Yeah.
I'm in the process of navigating it myself also. So it's a process, to be your authentic self and to also want to mirror and show your kids, that you can tap into all these worlds and trust yourself. And I feel like there's so many beautiful gifts to share, but we do live in a world that's softening to the spiritual, I will say. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you were talking, I was kind of reminded of the witch's wound and kind of the fear of being found out and the fear of, having those mobs of people come at you, with their fiery torches. Which was part of, my coming out story, was that I had a deep embedded fear of that process. Did that would affect you at all as well?
Yes. And yes. And I didn't know that that's what it was.
Mm,
Yeah, it was really a mind boggle. So when I started animal communication, I was like, I want to do this professionally, but I actually can't speak. Like, I
mm-hmm,
had this energetic block in my throat that literally felt like somebody was shoving something down there and saying, "No, you cannot speak."
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
was like, "Well, that's great. Okay." And then at the same time, it was like the closer I got to my soul mission, which I feel like I'm like landed on,
Mm-hmm.
there was so much fear to the point where I was like, "I think I'm going to quit. I want to go crawl in a hole and never be seen again." But I was like, "No." Like, I don't know where this fear is coming from. And so for a while, for about a year, I was like, I want to go forward, but I am so scared. I'm like a deer in headlights. Like, if somebody were to come with a car right now, they would run me over because I'm terrified. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know where that was coming from. And it really kind of bothered me. And so what I ended up doing was I tapped into my guides. I was also learning at that time to read the Akashics. And I was
Mm.
like, if you keep telling me I need to go forward, I yell at my guides a lot. I was like, you keep telling me to go forward, and I am absolutely petrified. Like, I need to know where this is coming from, or I can't actually go forward.
Mm.
And so, what ended up happening was they showed me glimpses of my past lives.
Mm.
Um, they all did not end well. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
relate.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Uh, but I did slowly start to peel away a lot of my fears
Mm.
and realize that I was safe. Even now that we're talking about this, I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable.
I know. I,
Uh,
I hear you. It makes my body hot to talk about it. Like
yeah, my
physically.
body, my
Yeah.
body gets hot, and then I feel pressure on my heart and in my throat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you have to remember that you are safe. You're going to be okay this time. And it's like something I still have to remind myself of is like it's okay. You're going to be okay.
Mm.
Um, so the witch wound has been a thing that has, I don't know if I'm still completely healed, but it's something that I know a lot of people that come through my community and classes, they eventually deal with. And they're like, oh, there it is. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's go there.
Absolutely. I'm feeling called to share my coming out story because as you were saying, that you were petrified, and I remember just being in the fetal position, like under a blanket in my living room and thinking about posting about coming out. And I had been working actually on this podcast, Under the Moon Gate, for 3 months in secret. I was calling myself the Buffalo Medium, and I was using it as this beautiful outlet and learning so much from spirit, but was terrified to kind of publish under my name. And I had been getting a lot of messages from my guides that like, it's time, it's time, it's time. And I felt so sick to my stomach. And I was in my living room and I'm hiding under a blanket and I'm like, I'm going to throw up. Like I felt like I was going to like give myself a heart attack. And I said to my guides, like, I need help. I need a sign. Like, help me, help me, help me. And I'm like underneath this blanket, like my poor guides are like, well, what are we going to do? Like you're under a blanket. Like, what are we going to send you? And on the floor, on the ground, on the carpet is this little red string. And I burst into tears because I had just read Mary Magdalene Revealed and Megan Watterson Loves a Red String and the Divine Feminine and the whole thing. And I felt so deeply that that was for me. And I was like, okay, I can do it. But it is a weird physical, it's a physical block almost. Mm-hmm. Talk about like the astral coming down, and yeah, it's a deep wound that we're all trying to unearth, I think, and not even heal really so much as like have the courage to talk about, because that's it, is like naming it and finding out what it is.
Yep. Yeah. And it's like once you rip the Band-Aid off, it's like, all right, I did it once, I can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally agree there.
The floodgates of love just pour on through.
Yeah.
Is there anything that about kind of figuring out the balance of your spirituality that we didn't talk about, or any stories or things that, but while we close, you want to share, or did I miss anything? I feel like we went in so many different fun places. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I just feel like in today's world, find a community and find the little things in life that are magical and give you that permission to go there. I guess that to me is kind of the takeaway, and merging the practical physical with the mystical is like just being intentional, allowing it to happen, and then also reminding yourself not to get lost in the ethers.
Don't get stuck out there. Come back, come back,
yeah, come back. We need you here.
We need you here. We need you here to do the work. Get your lessons, get your learnings, recharge, and then come back. Come back and deliver the good witch word.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Kara, thank you so much for being Under the Moon Gate. It's such an honor to have you. I'm always so hypnotized by your magical stories, and I know our audience is just going to love hearing from you. Before we go, are there any places or spaces they should be following you? I know you're active on Instagram. Anything our audience can be on the lookout from you?
Yeah, Instagram is kind of my hub. It's where I'm most active. I do have a private Facebook group for anybody that's on Facebook. It's kind of a cool community. We dive into the magical and practical. Those are the two places right now. And my formal website is just deeprootconnections.com. And that's kind of where you can see what's coming up and what's going on, and connect with me there otherwise.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story. And I had a wonderful time talking to you, and I always learn so much when we chat.
Thank you so much, Erin. Always a pleasure to connect with you too.
Under the Moon Gate is produced and hosted by me, Erin Bagwell. And to learn more about my new documentary about the Forgotten Goddess era, the Burning Times, and a modern woman's quest for divinity, visit theresurrectionofthewitch.com and pass the magic along. Rate, review, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Plus, if you want episodes delivered to your inbox, you can join me on Substack as a free subscriber. Okay, thanks so much for listening.